This is a channel about teaching and learning in secondary science. So separate yourself from that for just a moment, if you will, and let's think about something very simple that most of us have done for ourselves, or we have done for our children or our grandchildren, and that is riding a bike. When we teach kids how to ride a bike, even though the first time they're probably on a bike is even with pedaling their feet on the ground or with training wheels, we absolutely don't expect them to ride the bike well from having told them how to do it. We might get more success showing them pictures and videos, or certainly they've seen us ride a bike, or neighbors, or someone has ridden a bike. So they have the right idea, right? And so we could get so far explaining what the pedals are, what the pedals do, and how they hold onto the handlebars, all of the things. But we can't expect them to actually ride the bike with that instruction, because there's the whole balance thing they have to master. And that only comes with doing. If we revisit one of the only comments actually on videos on my channel, someone shared that one of the new things that they had been trying to do is cooking. This could also apply to any new thing we really try to do. Reading about it isn't going to cut it. Watching it might be okay, but there's some things that just require practice. Show and tell has merit, absolutely. But now if we take that mentality, that show and tell mentality, we put it in our classrooms, and we're teaching something complex or higher level, and our students aren't as excited as they might be if we were trying to teach them to do something like ride a bike. Even if we're showing and telling a kid 5 years old how to ride the bike, how much are they really connecting with us? How much are they really okay, I'm totally in, I got it, let's do it. They're just, let me do it. Let me do the thing. So at the start of a school year, it's probably common for all of us in secondary science to review the scientific method, or whatever you're calling it, all the steps that are involved, from observation and asking questions straight through to communicating your findings. And revisiting that process probably mostly as a means for expectations for the year in the lab portion of your class. And that's great, but that's the same sort of instruction. It's showing and telling. Even if you have some clever way for students to work with the steps, discuss the steps, even if they're going to try to practice them, it's show and tell, and then we're still telling them all the things up front. In inquiry-based, discovery-based, three-dimensional style instruction, the show and tell is displaced. We kind of put it at the end, and we put it at the end really only to clarify misconceptions, or maybe to dive a little deeper. Well, in this video, I'll show you how to make over your scientific method lesson for inquiry and discovery style delivery. Hi, I'm Lisa, and this is Lab in Every Lesson. We've been working through an inquiry-based back-to-school series here on the channel, and this is the third installment. You may want to pause and go back to videos 1 and 2, or just revisit them later. In the first video, we just kind of said, stop lecturing. And in the second video, it was more about how your syllabus can communicate that feel, that expectation, that class time is going to be very active, very discovery-based. And in this video, we're going to show you how that very first activity proves that you actually mean it. Now, at the same time here, I'm kind of trying out a new format, a little makeover style. So what I'm going to do in this video for you is show you my old scientific method lesson, which is a great lesson, but how we can transform that, even a syllabus activity, into an inquiry-based delivery. To start every lesson, I always outline learning intentions and success criteria for students. And when we're using learning intentions and success criteria, if you're not familiar, we're separating the why and the what, the why from the what. Why are we learning this? Why are we doing this lesson? Why are we spending a precious 50 minutes or more on it? So that, again, we understand the purpose for and the differences between every step in the lesson. We may not want to say to the students, we just want to remind you because your brain's been on vacation for 3 months. We do maybe want to get them practicing. That was the intention in this lesson anyway, not just to understand and recall those steps, but also do it. At least get introduced to what they look like again. And you'll see even the success criteria match that. Success criteria intended to be actually a list of verbs. What are students going to do in class that day? And you can see it's make observations, develop a hypothesis, suggest ways to test that hypothesis, and then some ancillary stuff with data presentation and communication. But before students even encounter this, they would usually come into class with what I call a review and preview. It's their warm-up activity. And in secondary science, for sure our students have seen these before. It's not new information. What I used to have them do is just try to put them in an order. A couple things here, you notice they're not in a linear order because science isn't. It kind of repeats and goes roundabout. There's always a discussion that comes from what came first, the question or the observation. So we have a nice discussion about that. And the other thing you'll notice here is that it's not just a list. I do have an entire reward system built around the science as a verb, science practice, what I now refer to as the science and engineering practices. And that's what you'll see here because it was my first introduction to students on how they will be rewarded, that they will see these badges kind of around my classroom for doing the actions that they're going to learn about. So yeah, this is the scientific method made active. So the remainder of the lesson focuses on giving them a scenario in which to work and practice using those tools. Or I just give them the scenario, and it has to be a real life scenario because the whole message here is I'm showing up every day to teach you science so you can use it in your daily life, not so that you can be a walking encyclopedia and win Jeopardy someday. No. Someday you're going to have a crying baby, and then what do you do? And it historically has been a great discussion period. Students recognize that they're not accountable for something heavy, complex, hard. They know what babies need. They just do. It's kind of like part of living, right? So we can go through all the process together. Even if I separate them in small groups, they can go through the process themselves. It's very active. It's not super inquiry, but it's very active and it's very collaborative. The remainder of this lesson focuses on things like refreshing how we communicate data and what data is and how we can show it numerically and graphically and so on, and a little bit of writing. It's good. I think it's not great, but it's good. At this point, I'll let you know that you're not the only one thinking to yourself, maybe, hey, Lisa, there's more to learning than inquiry. Just like this comment from Jessica I recently got on TikTok that reads, yes, I agree, but they need to know the vocab. They can't inquiry everything. And that's truth. Truth. They do eventually, especially in science, they need to know the language. In chemistry, they need to know the difference between a polyatomic ion and a monatomic ion. They need to know a reactant from a product. They need to know covalent bonding from ionic bonding. And in biology, they need to know the parts of the cell, and they need to know the different macromolecules, and we need to know the difference between asexual and sexual reproduction, all the things. That's part of disciplinary literacy. And our job is definitely to help assign that language, definitely give the students the words to use for the concepts that they uncover. But that's the key to it all. Students can work to uncover the essence of any core idea, any concept, anything, any fact we need to teach them. And so we can get so easily sucked into, there is no way for them to know this unless I tell them. Doing it at the front end means they're going to accept it, process it, use it. An inquiry and discovery design 3D NGSS lesson level design says no. We'll flip that. Let them see it, encounter it, think about it, and then we can say, yeah, you got it. That's called meiosis. That's called decomposition. You get me? Bringing it back to the beginning of the year here. inquiry-based back to school, bringing it back to introducing the scientific method, expectations for the school year. Let's introduce them in a more interactive way, in a more student-centered way, so that the outcome is engagement, so that while they're learning about them, they're actually doing them. So they're practicing and learning at the same time, just like if they were kind of getting their bearings balancing on a bike. So now let's take a look at a more inquiry discovery style introduction to the science and engineering practices at back to school at the beginning of the year. We are in Seesaw now. Seesaw is my favorite program for interactive learning. It does so many things. Yes, I teach in cyber, but I know that you use Google Classroom for a whole bunch of things and Google Slides. I know because I know because I know. Maybe even if you love Nearpod. I would say give Seesaw a chance. It's marketed to elementary teachers, all elementary teachers. However, it's just an amazing platform. In the description below, you'll see a link to my EdTech Essentials video and training guide so you can get started with your first activity if you love it like me, or if you want to love it like me. This is where my activity is because it's primarily a drag and drop activity. So again, you could do this in probably whatever your favorite tech program is. And you'll notice here that it says what to expect from biology in semester 2. So I have a little story about that. I'm going to save it for after my demonstration here for those of you who aren't interested. But there's a little twist there. If you've been following me, if you watch any of my videos, you know usually they're about chem. But yeah, last year I got to teach me some bio. And yes, the context of this video is back to school, yet I'm telling them semester 2. So put a pin in that. We'll revisit it in a few minutes. It says open the syllabus in the course. So this is a syllabus connected activity. In connecting it to that, we're making this a lesson about expectations for the year and a little bit of practice with what you had maybe discussed the day before. I've also included it in later pages with this and then this assignment just so that they don't have to be like switching between tabs and windows to get the activity done. It says drag and drop the standard codes to match each science and engineering practice as described, and then submit. The syllabus itself on the very final pages included lists of standards, the actual standard language, the actual standard codes as the last piece in the syllabus as a way to say this is what you'll learn this year. And we discussed in the last video about how too much technical could add to a sense of fear or apprehension, anxiety about can they do it or not? Do they feel prepared? Just be a little intimidating. And definitely adding this feature of including the codes is like, you might probably thinking, what are you off your rocker? This is completely unnecessary. But it works very well tying it into this activity because firstly, I like students to know that I have rules too. I don't just show up every day and be like, this is what I'm doing because I want to do it this way. This is actually what's required of me. And so because it's required of me, it's required of you. And so it's a little legalistic in that way, but that's okay. They get to experience an aspect of education maybe they didn't understand existed before. So what we've done after page 1 here is list all of those things. And so because this is a biology content, and again, we're looking at Steele's style standards, which are a derivative of the NGSS. There's so many of them. There's so many of them. 2 full pages landscape style. 3 and 4 per category. And just wow. So this is really well suited to an activity, a time-consuming activity if you've got a lot of standard items. Chemistry has like 10. And it's still effective because students get to think about what these science and engineering practices are and the kinds of verbs they'll do within them. But they definitely get even more exposure with a lot of them. And then you have the ability at the end to really help them identify patterns. So the main task here is drag and drop the standard code into the science and engineering practice you think it belongs in. So for example, asking questions and defining, well, we have all of the lists, right? I'm not going to read them to you. You presumably know what the SEPs are. Let's go for developing and using models, because in science, I feel like no matter what science you're teaching, this becomes front and center when you're using inquiry and discovery, so you can really connect technology that allows students to immerse themselves in the scenario. So we might scan through here now, depending on how a student wants to approach this. I would probably say become familiar with, some of those scientific method steps, truly, and then read through the standards and see kind of what fits, or start with the standards. And notice that every standard, I've taken the time to bold typeface, the piece that is science practice. So construct an explanation based on evidence. That one is maybe analyzing, interpreting data. Maybe that one is constructing explanations, I think. Ding, ding, ding. So what was that? Dash 12A. So a student would grab this and put it in that category. Maybe a different one, use a model, is pretty clear. Use a model to illustrate cellular division. Now, what this is going to do for students, the rest of the standard says, use a model to illustrate the role of cellular division, mitosis, and differentiation in producing and maintaining complex organisms. Like, that whole second part can be like, what did you just say? Like, the language there, they have no idea, and it sounds hard. But what are they truly accountable for? Using a model to show how it works. And that's what we want them to come away with. That the goal here in our job, what we have to follow, is not only that students learn the thing. This no longer says understand the role of cellular division and differentiation. It says use a model to illustrate it. And so when you're discussing this at the end, which one was that? Dash B. When you're discussing this at the end, you're able to say, now, this is going to be part of our learning. However, it might also be part of our assessment. So at the end, don't get comfortable feeling like you could just answer multiple questions about mitosis and cell differentiation, because there's a process and there are models we're going to use to understand it. So there's going to be models you're going to have to provide to show your understanding of it. Up here, we have use mathematical representations to support claims for cycling of matter and flow of energy. So that's dash 8, and that's using math, right? Dash H, and so we have using math. These biology standards, they run the gamut. I want to show you actually a completed student work. This was a fantastic student, and this is how those biology standards in Pennsylvania kind of hash out. When you're done, clearly what you can say to students, something that immediately pops out to you and I that they might have not otherwise known, is, where is most of our science as a verb time going to be spent in the class? Now, it's not just I have to do all these things, but wow, looks like I'm going to be really using a lot of models. There's several standards connected with that, which what students will have learned by that time is that those standards will all say use a model. If we go back to those standards here, develop and use a model, use a model, use a model, use a model. And what happens, develop a model. After that is about different content. So they're looking at this array of things they're going to have to learn, and they're going to say, I'm going to have to draw or interpret models for many different concepts in the course. Also, it appears I'm going to have to obtain, evaluate, and communicate information. Runners up 3 and 4 using math. And, this is a great thing for biology, because I'm like, did you think there was math in biology? And of course, you and I know that if you teach biology or life science, genetics is all about probability. They don't know that's coming, but they go, oh, there's a little bit of math in this class, and constructing explanations, designing solutions. Most of our science is going to be heavy here. Things we're not going to be so heavy on, not just in my cyber school, but in general. And this is sort of a lesson for us also when we break it down this way. Planning and carrying out investigations, for those of you watching and you're just like, this isn't science. What is she talking about? This is not science. Science is at a lab station, and you have to have fancy instrumentation, and you have to have fancy chemicals and fancy all the things. No. Science is this process of observing and thinking and doing and thinking again and doing again and thinking again and coming away with an idea that maybe then we roll around with some other people, start it all over again. Planning and carrying out investigations, minimal in these standards. Also, analyzing and interpreting data. Now, I would challenge that a great inquiry and discovery designed lesson is going to have students analyzing observations every day. But in the formal sense of standards, here it's minimized. And I think really what it's meant to mean anyway in the standard is numerical data, graphical data. And in biology, we have so many more systems and system models that we have to look at. And now you might be thinking to yourself, Lisa, my course, I cannot do that for my course because fill in the blank. But no, I would challenge you that's not true. Let me tell you my story. Okay, this year, and for all the years you've ever maybe read my blog content or seen my TPT lessons or popped in here on YouTube or any other place that I am on the internet, I was talking about chemistry because chemistry is my expertise. Chemistry is where I've taught for 15, 16 years. And that's where I developed and applied this framework, Discovery by Design. However, last year, it threw me a little curveball at my school. Some funding changed at the state level. Cyber schools weren't going to be funded the same anymore, and 150 of our staff got laid off. Of course, that meant some students needed to be juggled around. Some teachers had to have different assignments, and not joking, I didn't even know I was legally able to teach biology. I have not had a biology course since I was in college, so I was definitely feeling very green about it. And to boot, I got them in the middle of the year. This happened mid-December 2025. So after winter break, we were going to come back and pretend we had a fresh start, but we didn't because a new marking period wasn't starting for like 2 or 3 weeks. And I could have, at that point, I'm going to be honest with you, was totally freaked out, didn't know how I was going to manage any of it. The folks who are existing biology teachers at my school, they shared their notes. They were all lecture notes, and I didn't know the content. So, the temptation to just throw it up there and read and have science story time, it was strong. It was strong. But ultimately, I knew that like deep inside myself, because I've just been doing this so long, that that's not learning, that I wasn't doing my best for the students by bringing them that, because I knew how to do it differently. And so once I convinced myself that it was all going to be okay, there's plenty of hours in the day, and I was going to make it through, I was going to transform this science content so those students had an experience. They didn't just come to class. They didn't just feel like they knew it or not knew it. No one could ever tell me they weren't a science person. They couldn't tell me it was too hard, because first and foremost, the main science and engineering practice I lean on to start all of my activities, all my lessons, is observation. What do you see? Because every student, most every student can see, and they can interpret what they see on some level. Now, how willing they are to share that is a whole nother story. But I was able to apply my lesson planning framework to an entirely different content area with success. Students were engaged, which is an outcome. Took some of them a little bit of doing. Some of them fought me hard on it. They were used to a way, and I felt bad about that. But at the same time, I just thought it was a better way for me to run the class and for them to experience the class. So we did it. And if I could do it, you could do it. And I'll just leave you then with this parting thought that if you're thinking, how do I get started? Even 5-6 years into this process for myself, the way I start an activity like this, if I want to make something more discovery based, I simply ask myself, what can the students do to see what I want them to see? I need them to do something. What's going to be the something? That's where you start, and the lesson almost writes itself.